So do you want to kind of talk about, I suppose, well, this all came about because me and you spend quite a lot of time talking about the stuff that makes us angry to each other.
Yes.
And we know there are also a lot of very angry people out there with similar stories to us. And we want to kind of get that out to people and invite them to join us in our heartfelt rage.
Yeah, that's right. And to share the knowledge, if I wasn't ill, I wouldn't have been able to do all the reading or have all the conversations with people that I've had. So I'd like for us to share that with other people, and then encourage you all to come and tell us what we don't know yet, what viewpoints we're missing, because I really feel that a lot of the solutions are in that in-between space that we never quite get to, because we've been taught to be too polite and not talk about really important things. And angers, especially as a woman, I think is something we're encouraged to not share. And actually, how can you look at what is going on in the world and not be angry? So yeah, that's what this is about for me, just sharing what we've learned and asking anybody who happens to watch us to come and tell us where they disagree with us, where they agree with us, what they'd like us to talk about in future.
Yeah, sharing what we've learned, but also really owning what we don't know, which is vast. But being really honest about that, and hopefully other people can help us fill in those blanks as well and go on a bit of a journey with us. Do you want to talk a little bit about your background, what kind of got you into activism?
I'll go first if you go second. Yeah, so for me it was really quite a big shock. I'd been ill, lost my job, thrown on the people's scrap heap, and went into a horrible depression about 4 years ago. And I was just coming out of it and considering what I'd do, thinking of going to the OU, and I heard Gail Bradbrook's Heading for Extinction talk. Just before I heard that, somebody I love had been called to go to magistrates court to defend their disability to get the PIP, which horrified me. That's a complete abuse of that building and that institution and fear. So I was feeling angry and that things weren't quite right. And then I heard Gail's Heading for Extinction talk, and it just hit me that my kids were in real danger. So despite my anxiety and not having left the house for a couple of years on my own, I had to go to London, and I did. And since then, I've just been challenging myself to question everything, to allow my anger, and to try my best to be 90% love and 10% go fuck yourself, because there's horrible stuff happening. And to not be scared of looking stupid or of saying the wrong thing or of getting things wrong, because in finding out where we were wrong, we might find out the rights. So yeah, that really for me was the start, and it's been beautiful, challenging, scary and wonderful, and yeah, just blessed with lovely people like yourself. So how did you get into activism?
Weirdly, through my psychology degree, and being encouraged to, whilst learning about social inequality, to not just feel angry about it and disappointed that it is the way it is, go and do something about it. You now have this knowledge, and therefore it is incumbent upon you to go and do something about it. At that point, I didn't really know where to aim that, and there seemed so much inequality. And not long after that came along the April Rebellion, 2019, Extinction Rebellion's April Rebellion, and I went along to that with my daughter, just for a day, and was totally not what I'd expected at all. I'd seen quite a lot of chaos on the news stories, and was a little bit worried for my daughter and got there, and then it was really peaceful, lots of songs and people talking and people handing out information and inviting you to talks and trainings, and it was all really well organized and everybody was super friendly. And it was one of the loveliest spaces I've been in for a really long time. And after that I was inspired to start a local group, which is still up and running. But I was interested, how did you hear about the Heading for Extinction talk if you weren't involved at that point?
I was getting my garden sorted, so my routine had been disturbed. I put the news on and heard Boris Johnson saying there were uncooperative crusties in London, and I saw all these beautiful banners and colours and saw the XR symbol. So I went online and Googled it, and just landed on the Heading for Extinction talk. It was pure chance, and again, without this disability, without being chucked on the people's scrap heap, I never would have heard it. And that really feels important for me, and I keep saying it because I think this system is designed to try and keep us from hearing the truth and from feeling disempowered and unable to change anything. And it's one of the biggest lies of all, I've realized. It doesn't have to be like this. It is a choice of the media and our establishments to prevent us from seeing the truth. Like, for example, in school we're taught about economics and that kind of theory as if it's as solid as something like gravity, and it's not. It's just a theory. There are many other options. Maggie Thatcher famously said, Tina, didn't she, there is no alternative. That's bollocks. There is lots of alternatives. It's just the will we're lacking. So it was just happenstance, really. I don't know if it's, if we're being called up at the time you can act, because there's no other point in my life I could have done this. My children are of the right age. Because I've lost my job, I'm able to. And fully working, and as a mum, I never would have had the time to really look at it. I can remember back in the day hearing about Swampy for the first time and thinking, what an idiot. Sorry, Swampy, I was very wrong. but that's the truth.
I mean, we've spent ages talking about how much we've changed in such a short space of time. So we were those people. We were those people who were part of the system, voting in people that did not have our best interests at heart, falling for it all, hook, line and sinker for years and years and years, and have been eating enormous amounts of humble pie as we've started to dig around, and that's where the rage is coming from, isn't it? Because I heard a really great phrase yesterday about we've been hoodwinked.
Yes.
As a society, we've been totally hoodwinked. And the more I learned in psychology as well about how governments manipulate people, that was quite, and this is how naive I was. I used to, especially linked to the climate crisis, because we didn't talk about politics as a family growing up. It wasn't something the news used to be on, but no one used to talk about it. I had absolutely no idea. And I used to think, with the whole climate crisis, I just thought, they're not going to let anything get that bad. Like, it's being totally overblown, because if there was anything that bad happening, we'd know about it. Wow. And it's been incredibly painful and incredibly difficult to realize that not only do they know about it, they've known about it for a really long time and have done nothing and continue to do nothing except make it worse, just accelerate it. And that makes me quite angry.
Makes me really angry. And I'll never forget that first council meeting I went to, where one of them councillors said, we cannot tell people the truth unless we make it happy, because people will get depressed and do nothing. I'm still raging about that. It's absolute. That's another lie. That's them talking from their place of fear. I mean, imagine when the whole world finds out that these people have been lying to us. You know, Exxon and that, they started the lie 40 years ago. And they said, we've got 2 to 5 years to make some hard decisions. Well, they've made their hard decisions. They've sold out the global south. They've decided to keep making themselves money. And people like you and me and our kids on the scrap heap. I'm furious about it, and I'm not having it. And they need our help. I mean, imagine what's gone on in their heads that they can kill their own planet and carry on. It's insanity. It's insanity. And they need.
And I think learning that the majority of people who are CEOs, who are politicians, are narcissists and psychopaths, a huge number of them. And these are the kind of people that are making decisions that affect the whole world and have only their interests at heart, and that's short term. You know, they don't care what happens after they've gone. You know, even with respect to their children, because if they did, we wouldn't be where we are. And we're still allowing people with those kind of tendencies to make decisions for us. And it's clear. I mean, how many examples do you want to give of our current government and the decisions they're making that only benefit a tiny amount of people? And it's the people who benefit them. Matt Hancock's just been proven that you know, those COVID pandemic contracts were cronyism, it's corruption. But they're known for that. And they've always been like that. And yet we keep voting for them. And I'll say we, because I haven't personally, because I only started voting a couple of years ago, but I think I would have done with the little that I knew. I probably would have done in the past.
Yeah, I haven't ever voted Tory, but I didn't vote in the Brexit vote because I didn't know what was going on. I didn't understand it. And instead, you know, we've been so disempowered. I was taught that nice girls don't talk about politics, religion, or the news. You know, it's naughty to talk about stuff like that. So I internalized a lot of it. And I've realized that a lot of my depression and my, you know, lack of love for myself came from trying to force myself to succeed and get on in a system that is inherently wrong. It's just bad. And the fact that it is psychopaths and narcissists who make it to the top proves how bad it is, you know. And then I also get angry with the ones, like talking to Roger, he says there are MPs, well-known MPs, coming to people like him saying, look, this is the truth and this is what we need. Cowards, how dare you tell people like Roger to come to mums like me to get on the streets when you're in a place where people would listen to you and you're too scared to talk out? It makes me furious, really angry. Because like you said, they're sailing their own kids down the river. You know, it's just cowardice and being more scared of change than saying stop. You know, there are other alternatives. Let's have a go. Yeah, it's sickening.
And it's scary, right? Because we've talked about how sometimes it's really hard to hold all of that knowledge and all of that fear and not just go la 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 la. You can absolutely just carry on your everyday life because there's nothing out there stopping you doing that. There's no, you know, the papers are getting better, but I mean, really, it should be being covered like the pandemic, because actually it's far worse. And that's not happening. So you're not getting those daily reminders that something serious is already happening. It's not coming, it's happening. And so it's really easy to just pretend it's not. And sometimes it's hard to hold that. And even activists slip in and out of that, where they go, do you know what, it's a bit much for me at the moment, I've got to take some time out. And it's not that they pretend it's not happening, but you can dial right out of it for a while because there's no in your face reminders, and we have to keep forcing ourselves into those spaces where we're constantly being reminded of that.
Yeah.
But I think for both of us, like, where people get their information on is really important. So what we're hoping to do is to have lots of conversations that will tend to be about a specific thing, and this is more a kind of an introductory one about about us and why we're doing it. But things like the handling of the pandemic and stuff like that will be whole conversations on their own, rather than lingering on any of them too long. But and we definitely want to do one about where people get their information from, because before I did my degree, I would take most people at their word. So if there was common knowledge, if a lot of people were stating something as if it was a fact, then I didn't think to question it. And there's that kind of societal knowledge that we all kind of take for granted. And there are lots of myths and things that we grow up believing and don't ever think to question it. And when you find out it's not true, like your whole belief system starts falling away. But where you get your information from is really important. And I would have believed a lot of stuff in newspapers and things that I just read online somewhere. I wouldn't have known how to check whether that was information I could trust or not. And we see that a lot with the pandemic, a lot of misinformation around the pandemic and stuff. And I know for you that's been quite a journey for you too.
Honestly, one of the most heartbreaking things for me was during the election back in, was that November 2019? And I'd already realised that I needed to watch select committees, PMQs, and debates and that in full, because I was only getting what they wanted me to see from them. But I can remember one debate in particular, it was Jeremy Corbyn and Boris. And when I watched, it wasn't Newsnight, it was the one that's Politics Live, so it was in the afternoon. Oh my God, the way they cut it to it wasn't just that they were only showing the words that they wanted to put across from Boris. They managed to cut it to make it look like the audience reacted in a way they didn't. So they made it look like the audience had laughed at Jeremy Corbyn and Boris like in the same way, and it's not that. So they're using peer pressure against us, right? So this is what everybody thinks. And most people, like if I was still working, I wouldn't have had time to watch all the debates. I would have gone to little sources on the BBC because I trusted it. So yeah, I cried a lot over not being able to trust the BBC. It hurt. It felt like a betrayal. You know, worldwide, the BBC is known. How have we let that go? Really. Yeah, I mean, it sounds a bit silly and melodramatic to go, I cried watching Politics Live, but I did. And it was realising, and then, you know, and then hearing about Orgreave, you know, I believed that the miners were just a bit violent and after a bit much. And it's come out, you know, years later, the BBC have since apologised for editing that footage to make it look like the miners fought first at Orgreave, and it wasn't. The police attacked first on horseback. Then they charged into their streets and towns and stuff. I mean, that's a civil war. It's heartbreaking. So checking your sources and questioning everything is tiring, but it's vital.
It is, and it is really time consuming, isn't it? And you have to, we were talking about how sometimes you end up finding people that you know are real experts in what they're talking about, and so that you don't have to go away and reference papers that they've written, because you know that they've written papers on it. This stuff it's what they do, and so you can take them at their word rather than having to constantly go and read quite complicated stuff. Sometimes we have to put our faith in people that can be trusted, but we have to be careful about who those people are and making sure those people aren't being bought and are independent.
Because the BBC tries to make out that they're impartial and that they're just giving two sides. But I mean, that's bollocks. If you're saying that 97% of scientists think one way, and 97% of scientists, I believe that, I might have the numbers a little bit wrong, do tell me.
That's right.
They agree that climate crisis is a dire situation. You've got 3% saying they're not. Now, in my mind, it's not given a balanced argument to allow that 3% to have the same level, if not more of a voice than the 97%. To me, that's just bullshit. that's trying to confuse people and force this agenda that is destroying my kids' future. It's yeah.
And it's been really interesting learning about things like statistics and how those things get manipulated. And weirdly, that's the same sort of statistic that's going around about coronavirus, isn't it? That there's, you know, you're 97% of people are fine. But if a doctor tells you there's 97% chance that you'll be fine, with 3% that you might die if you take this pill they're offering you, you're not going to take it. So it's about looking at things in perspective, and statistics constantly get manipulated.
Yeah,
and I think,
I'm really angry about this pandemic, because, you know, there are people I love, trust and respect who are saying the number of deaths are far too low, and there are people I love, trust and respect that are saying the number of deaths are far too high. And I just think it's disgusting and deliberate that we're all in this state of confusion and watching the world divide over masks and vaccines and stuff. It's heartbreaking to me, because I feel it's been deliberate. You know, when our government went from the red stay at home messaging to the green be alert, they have really clever psychologists on their team. They know exactly what they're doing. They know the colour red means stop. They know the colour green means go. And we are responsible for everybody, right? So not just the people that, like you and me, can look into it and watch the shadow scientists and things like that. We're responsible for everybody. So all the people that don't have the time or the intelligence to read through science documents, to give them green messaging, it's unforgivable to me.
yeah, and I think there's so much that we're angry about, and we're just ordinary people, but are choosing to take action where we can on the things that we think are important, and hoping to invite other people to not take our word for things, but to find out, and we'd like to invite people for things when we say we don't know. If people do, absolutely help us fill in those blanks. Please. We are sponges at the moment, soaking up all of the information, but we've also learned an awful lot in the last 2 and a bit years.
I have. I've read a lot, I've watched a lot, I've spoken to a lot of people, so I know some things that are facts that I think have been withheld from the majority of the population, but like you said, I know there's a vast majority more that I don't know. And I do think we need to start talking, not arguing, not like what I see on, you know, watching the House of Commons. It's sickening. I mean, they're sat against each other, and they're just trying to work out the cleverest, you know, dish you to each other. It's argumentative, and the solutions we need aren't going to come from arguments. They're going to come from saying we don't know everything, let's talk about it, and finding the solutions which will be in the middle somewhere. Yeah,
I mean, yeah, that's just made me think about the fact that, like, where my school was, and at the other end there was a grammar and a high school, and thinking about even those guys then making decisions that affected us. I don't like that idea very much at all. And we're talking about it on like a huge spectrum then, when there's ordinary people like us having decisions made for us by people that have always had money, have been born into money, are sent to schools that train them to be in positions of power and entitlement. The idea that they might have a clue what life is like for most people, and I think that goes for most politicians. The majority of politicians have had that kind of life, and we're allowing them to make decisions that affect all of us. And a lot of the time people are there's we don't want to get too party political, but constantly we're being divided. So first it was Brexit, then there was division over the pandemic, and actually that serves a purpose, because it keeps us fighting amongst each other so that we can't get angry at the people with power, which is the only thing that will ever change anything.
Yeah, I mean, I can honestly say I trust Keir Starmer even less than I trust Boris Johnson, and I feel even more let down by Keir Starmer during this, because he's pretending to represent the working class people like us, and he's just not asking the right questions. He's just not setting the agenda that we need. And while I feel sorry for them that they went to these boarding schools, you know, and taken away from their parents, taught that, you know, this distorted history that the white man is supreme and that they're better than people with less money and not born into their family. I believe as children, they must have felt the lie in that and the pressure that it put on them to have to be special. But while there's a part of me as a mum that can go, okay, I feel sorry for you, there's still accountability. At the end of the day, they're grown people now, and there still is accountability. And the facts are the facts. They're killing their own planet. They're selling us off down the river to do it. And what we're fighting for, citizens' assemblies, participatory budgets, deliberative democracy, it's not going to hurt anyone. You know, they might have to give up some of their material goods, but I'm all right with the only thing becoming extinct being billionaires. I have no problem with that. I think it hurts billionaires to be billionaires. If you're the kind of person that's after material stuff, you never have enough, right? You never have enough. So what they're missing is what we learned. I grew up in a beautiful community. We were all poor, but we all had the same. And it was lovely, and it's strong and it's resilient. And somehow we've just lost what is actually good about being alive and human. And it's nothing, you know, if a fire or a drought can take something away from you, is that really what life is about? No, it's not. It's about connections and people and exploring your thoughts and learning what you want to learn, you know, but we're crushed from a very early age and told to walk the line to be a cog in a system that's broken. So it's damaging all of us. And you're right, it's time to stop for their own sake as much as for ours. You know, this isn't me being envious. I don't envy any of them at all. I wouldn't want to be a royal or have been born into one of these families that sent me off to boarding school. I had a beautiful, loving childhood surrounded by many adults who loved me. And I think that's a huge part of why I can be resilient now and why they're so fractured, because I don't think they trust each other. Do you remember when Cummings was doing his comings and goings? Oh, I had to drive miles away because we needed help with a baby. And somebody said to Michael Gove, well, aren't you two friends? Haven't you known? Couldn't you help? And I remember thinking, yeah, you probably don't have any relationships like I do. You probably have no nourishing relationships in your life because you've been taught a lie. And yeah, you're focused on all the wrong things. And they're killing their own planet. It's madness. It's madness.
I mean, we had a talk about, you know, how do we steer with political stuff, and it kind of came to everything's political, right? We can't talk about any of this stuff without it being political, because everything is. And I think as soon as I started, I wouldn't even still say that I'm interested in politics. You have to, yeah, it doesn't interest me, but you have to be aware of it because it affects everything, right? And once I started realizing that our laws are affected by politics, parties come in and they change laws to suit their agenda, that whether we live in a democracy or not is debatable. How politics affects inequality and everything, that it underpins a society. That was just, it was such a, that was a head fuck, massive. And I don't know about you, like for a while I felt completely powerless, because it was like, well, I'm just one person, what do I do? And it's the same with the climate crisis, and it's the same with COVID and stuff like that. You're like, I'm just one person. But you find people that feel the same as you do, and you get together with them, and we've both been in groups where people have been talking about similar things, and actually you start to find out you're not powerless at all, that actually the only thing that ever changed anything was a group of people saying no.
Exactly. And this is the same fight, you know. For me, it's not just XR wasn't quite hitting all the spots. The climate crisis is a symptom of much greater things. And I think we can probably take it back to when women first became disempowered. As soon as they made women property and forced us to not, you know, out of all the decision making spaces. And I know we're coming into it a little bit now, but it's not enough, you know, it's not balanced. And we can see that in this energy, and it's damaging to the men. So for me, this is a continuation of the suffragettes fight. They weren't just fighting to put an X on a box once every 4 years. They wanted the vote to affect change. They cared that capitalism was killing us. It's the same fight as Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. As soon as you allow people to be treated different because the shade of their skin is different, then you allow anybody to be treated like that. I mean, Ian Haney Lopez explains it much better than me, but yeah, we have to stop. We just have to stop. It's crazy. This is the same battle. We need to bring back equality. We need to share resources fairly right across the world, and we'll all be happier for it. You know, it's a silly, greedy story, and the solutions are beautiful. And sometimes I just like, how can anybody resisting what we're asking for? Because it's beautiful, you know. It's and I think fear of change is a big part of it. A lot of people are really scared of change because we've been squashed for so long.
And usually it's the people with the least who are the most willing to give. You know, people that have grown up in poorer communities, you're used to hearing about a particular family. We had a family down the road whose house burnt down, and then everyone gathers around to try and help that family, even though they haven't got much themselves. Because when you're used to not having very much, you're not constantly keeping hold of your stuff. You're not so worried about, well, this bit's mine. You're more worried about your community and looking after them. And I don't, as an adult, I don't have that. I don't have that sense of community. And I don't think a lot of people do, because we're also primed to worry about ourselves in our little bubble, that a lot of us have lost that. And nearly everyone I talk to says, yeah, actually, yeah, like if I think about how things were when I was a kid in my street and the kids all used to play together, and you know, some people do still have that, but it's rarer.
Yes. I'm lucky. I've had it twice in my life. So I had it when I was 7, up until I was 7 in Corby in my family, and then my dad did really well and got a really good job, and we had money for a while. We moved to Milton Keynes. When my parents got divorced, the Catholic Church said Mum couldn't go to church anymore, so I couldn't go. So that was my first realization that, hang on, grown-ups say stuff, you know, but they don't walk the walk. What is going on? I became a bit of a wild teen and it all fell apart. But then when I became a single mum, in my early 20s, I moved into a street, and we were nearly all single mums, right? That's what they do, isn't it? Oh, scourge of society, chuck them all together. And it was beautiful. So we made our own community, and our children had a lovely childhood again, not because we had money, but because every birthday, every Halloween or whatever, we were always together. You know, we take it in turns cooking. There wasn't a lot, but you make a stew, you can make it for more, and we'd share, and it was lovely. But yeah, I had to move again, and I don't have it where I am now, and I long for it. Yeah.
And the more me and you have shared about our lives, the more we've realized just how much of what has gone on in our lives has been affected by the political situation, and us being completely unaware of it at the time. So that whole housing policy, you know, that's a political decision.
It is.
And for many of the things that have happened in our lives, and then it changes your whole perspective. And I think we've had a year now of not really being able to go out and do anything. So you've been making videos for quite a while, haven't you, where you're just speaking your truth, and doing a lot of this kind of processing. I've kind of had almost a year out, but we've been having conversations, and then that whole time it tends to just be like quite this heated, like, oh, did you hear this, and have you read that, and we know other people feel like that, and we want them to be able to know that yeah, other people feel like that too, and can join us.
Yes. Yeah, I'm desperate for people to know, you know, when I lost my job, I can't tell you how much it shattered me, right? Jobs are not just about money, they're about much more. Human beings, children, we need to explore and learn and talk to people and do something valuable. There's a word that's gone missing, vocation, in the world, but that's another conversation. But once I started to learn that it was choices, austerity was a choice, you know, we know now it's not just a money tree you need to find. They've got a bloody money jungle, right? It's all choices, and they're about to do it to us again. You know, they're already saying we're not going to tax the businesses. Well, that means we're paying, you know, the people with nothing are going to pay again. And I really want everybody to understand, everybody who's just been chucked into the dole offices and the communities like that, it's not on you, it's not on us. This is a choice of those with more than they need, wanting to keep more than they need, and they don't care how much we suffer for it. So I don't want anybody who's just lost their job or been thrown on this people scrap heap to feel that they're fucked up. No, you've just come a cropper of the choices that the people at the top, the decisions are being made. It does not have to be like this. We could have universal basic incomes. There are ways at the moment of making sure that everybody is fed, you know. And a small bugbear at the moment, America are running out of drinking water. How do the establishments deal with that? You know, you've got the structures that you can build out of bamboo and it will suck in water and it'll make water. Are they going for that? No, they put water on the stock market. I mean, it's a fucking joke. It's disgusting. And that's leading us for a revolt in revolt, right? If our precious resources have to be fought, people will end up fighting. So that's why I fight for citizens assemblies, participatory budgeting, is because I don't want a revolt in revolt. I truly believe that if enough people understand that this is just a choice and that there are other alternatives, we'll have a beautiful revolution, right? And our kids deserve that.
Absolutely. And it was the same with the pandemic. Us choosing to put the economy over people was a political choice.
Yes, it was.
And when you see how differently other countries have managed it, me and you get really frustrated. We keep seeing people saying, well, no one else could have done better, or the government are doing the best that they can. Absolutely not in any way whatsoever. And what you were saying about the job centres, on my degree, there was a particular, I think it was in the 90s, and they started up a new job scheme, and they started up a questionnaire for people that were going in, that were on income related benefits. And the questionnaire was all about making people feel individually responsible for the position that they were in. So it was all about your personality and why you were there, rather than you looking at the system. And that was psychologists that had developed that, and it was intentional. It was done very intentionally, and that was all part of Margaret Thatcher and
Friedman and his economic theory of.
Yeah, I mean, me and you can definitely do a whole talk on all of that, neoliberalism, and but this is how we can, without realizing, end up feeling that, and there's a lot of that with the climate crisis as well, is that yes, we are seeing more stuff on the news, and people are talking about it more, but when it comes to politicians and when it comes to big organizations, a lot of the focus is still on individual responsibility. And yes, the things as individuals we can do to help, but this is so huge. There's absolutely no way, even if all of us became vegan today and gave up our cars, and any number of things you care to mention, it's still not going to be enough. Everybody has to be on board with it. And the idea that as individuals we have the responsibility is absolute crap. And me and you feel very strongly about calling people out on this shit, because we've had enough of it.
I totally have. I mean, they're very clever. They know what they're doing. It is a deliberate choice, and they're very clever with their words. You know, just for example, you always hear people talking about, why don't we have enough affordable housing? Why the fuck do we have too much unaffordable housing? You know, it's just a slight change in how you phrase things. And yeah, they're very clever. 55 Tufton Street, they sit in there and they work out how to spin the lie to make us feel disempowered, responsible for our own failings, when the truth is there's not enough. Before the pandemic, there wasn't enough jobs for everybody, you know, and there are shitty jobs that need doing to keep things running. Well, we should share them, right? You know, we could share them out, and I believe people would. And if the government would just get honest about the level of crisis we're in, I know deep in my soul that we would come together, that communities would form, and that people would get on board with doing what is necessary. What's preventing us is exactly what you said. They're putting it all on us, making individuals feel useless, helpless, soothing. You know, if you've got enough money and you don't really want to face it, well, you can plant your trees, you can go vegan, you can, but that's not an option for everybody, right? So it's not good enough, I'm afraid. If you're thinking you're a vegan and that you're doing the best you can, I'm afraid it's not enough. I need you to do more, and feel free to come and tell me why I'm wrong, you know. Yeah, it makes me really angry.
Yeah, and now already we've got like a list of 5 things. We've already mentioned it.
Yeah, so maybe we should wrap up. So do the awkward bit. We'll pretend people have watched this and are listening, and I just really want to say, please, if you disagree with anything we've said, come and tell us. If you have alternative viewpoints or things that we've missed out, we really want to hear it. If there's subjects you want us to cover, we'd really like to know. We were hoping we'd do this like on a weekly basis, maybe bi-weekly. As an activist, I just got a court summons, so I'm off to court on Friday, and I think I'm going to get a little bit of a holiday on Her Majesty's leisure. So also, if you're an angry mum like us and you're brave enough to come and share your truth and just put yourself out there and join the question, get in touch, because I think it's time women's voices were heard a bit more. And that's not to leave men out, but we are mums, and I heard this lovely phrase, the hand that rocks the cradle cradles the rock. And there is a need for anger at the moment. There is a need to release that. There is a need to stand up against these bullies. They need us to do it for them as much as for our own kids. Love you. Anything you want to say to wrap
up? I think I would very much like to have quite an in-depth chat with you when you've had that experience about what that's been like for you, because for a lot of people the idea of breaking rules and doing things, me and you were brought up to be very law-abiding, rule-following people, and it's only when we realised how corrupt the whole system is that we've realised it doesn't leave us with a choice. In order to right things, sometimes you have to do things that are deemed to be wrong, and it sits uncomfortably, for sure. Like me and you have spent a long time going, oh, I don't like it, this is uncomfortable, this isn't okay. But the other stuff that's going on is far worse.
Exactly.
And I think it would be really good to hear what your experience is like, and kind of why would you do that, Tracy?
Why would I? Because good people disobey bad laws, right? Yeah. And that's how change happens. We've seen it throughout history, haven't we? It's that's how change happens. I wish, right, I tried just talking to my friends and my family, just one-to-one or in groups from a normal point of view. I don't know why exactly. There's lots of reasons. That's probably a whole other thing about cognitive dissonance and stuff, isn't it? But until I glued my hand to a building and threw a bit of paint around, even people who love and trust me couldn't quite hear just how dire the situation was. So yeah.
And on that bombshell about you gluing yourself onto a building, we'll leave that little story hanging for people to hear on another conversation.
Angry Mum's over and out.
Well, yeah.